We're now going to take a look at file handling in PHP, and we will take a look at how to open, how to close a file, how to read the file line by line, etc. One very good resource that I have been using throughout this course and also while learning to program with PHP is the PHP Net Manual. Right, so this goes through all of the, well, pretty much covers most of PHP documentation, the methods built in, methods that you can use with the PHP language and so forth. Here we're going to look at a few file handling methods. First one being fopen, and we can see here that fopen binds a named resource which is specified by a file name to a stream. All right, so by file name it means either text file or a URL that can be opened using this method. And here we see a practical use of this method. Right, so we have a variable called handle and we're setting it equal to fopen, and this is the first parameter that fopen takes is the resource, and the second parameter, of course, is the action that we want to take with that resource. So down here we see the different modes, a table. So if we select R, this is for reading only, and W would be for writing, A is to append, and we see we have different variations of what we can do or how we can handle files using these different modes. So the very first one we'll look at is how to open a file. So what I'll do is copy this snippet of code and paste it here in my editor. Okay, let's do that. Okay, so now we have a path to a resource. So the resource that I will be using is my new file. So to get the path to this location, I simply click up here in the address bar, copy, and let me paste it. Right, so as we've learned before, we have to use our escape character. So let us escape these slashes. And finally, the name of the file is new file. So we have to include that here at the end. So what we have done here is essentially set up a handler for this file stream. Just to break this down a little bit better, I prefer to have the file path separately. So I would instead create a variable to store the file path and then plug the variable into our fopen method. Secondly, when dealing with files, it is extremely important to ensure that this file exists before we do anything with it. So we're going to put a check in to see if the file exists. So this method takes a parameter, which is the path to the file or directory. So we would just put our file variable and open up our curly braces. close that off. So we're checking to see the file exists first, and if it does, we create our file stream. Else, we can echo that there was an error. So this is how we put some error checking in when we are dealing with files, and it is highly recommended that we check our directories and paths to our files to ensure that they exist and that the files exist before working with them. So for instance, if something was misspelled on our file, let's save this and go back and refresh, we would get an error saying our file does not exist. So pretty much that is what our if file exists check does, right? All right, so usually when we are working with a file, when we are finished working with it, we have to close our file stream. And in order to do this, I'm going to change the format up of this error check a little bit. I'm going to use the R and the die function, and I'm going to put my error inside this function. So if it does not find the file, it will basically kill the program and print this error message. After we open up our file, there's usually some code or some action performed on the file. At the end of working with the file, we can do fclose, and we want to close our handle. Let me put some echo statements in our file, and let us say the first thing is file opened successfully. Put a break after that. Secondly, after we close the file, let us put a check here. Let us do a check. So if we're successful in closing the file, let us do an echo. That the file close was successful. All right, so let us save this. Refresh. And we see here that the file was opened successfully. And then we essentially did some work with the file, and now the file was closed successfully. All right, so that is how we would go about doing fopen on a file stream. Now that we have all of this set up, let us now actually perform an action with this file. So let us read the contents of my file. So let's say while we're not at the end of the file, so this method pretty much is a file pointer that begins at the beginning of a file. So we want to check and ensure that we're not at the end of our file. So we have to put our path as a parameter. And while this is not true, we're going to echo the contents of the file using fgetS. And let us also concat a break statement. So now this should print the contents of the file. So let us save this. And now let us open or run our file. So refresh. Okay, so let's see what our error is saying. Uncaught error, stream must be of type resource. On line 16. All right, let's look at line 16. Okay, so line 16, we're using FE off file. Let's see here, the error again. Argument stream must be of type resource. String given in string is given. Oh, all right, I'm seeing here what's happening. I am still checking for file, and we should be using our handle. Here we created our handler for the file, so this should be handle. And sorry about that, silly me. Right, so let us save this and let us try refreshing. And here we get the contents of our file. Right, the little dog laughed to see such fun, and the dish ran away with the spoon. And then we're seeing that our file close was successful. Right, so no matter how large the file is, this while loop will continue reading each line of the file until the pointer reaches to the end of the file. Another option, if we wanted to read each character instead of each line, we could change this to fgetC, and this would now read each character in our file. So if we were to save this and refresh, here we would see every character in my document has been printed, and then at the end, file close is successful. If we now wanted to add some text to our document, we could simply change this to a W to indicate that we now want to write to our file. So now let me create some text. And let us put, let's see here, let's say old MacDonald had a farm. All right, so this is the text that I want to use. And I'm going to comment out this section for now. So now we want to write to our file. So we would use the fwrite function, and we would plug in our handler or our handle, and then our text. And then we are going to close our file. All right, so let us save this. Let us now do a refresh. And now I can uncomment this section here. And let us now run our file. Okay, now we're getting an error, bad descriptor. So let's see what's causing that. Okay, so I have to change this back to R just to do the demonstration. So it says bad descriptor. Okay, and now we have our text. All right, so it didn't work as we expected initially, but that is part of programming, software development. I would say half your time will be spent, if not more, debugging and looking for the reason that your program is throwing errors and exceptions. So here we see that our read now works. So the final one I want to look at is append. Now appending data is very useful, especially if you have an application that does logging. So maybe errors occur throughout the day when people use the application and you want to log those errors. Usually you would use the append feature so that the previous logs do not get erased. For instance, I have a file here called my test, and here we see that it has a few lines here with some logs that would have happened at different times throughout the day. So logging is one important aspect in any system, and append allows us to be able to log actions. So let us use our append. We're changing our parameter here to our mode to A for append, and we want some new text. So let's say new file through our error occurred location. I think that's 2 R's, and let's just use, let's say March 1. I'm just entering this as a string. All right, and let's copy this and put another line of text. So this is new text 2, and this occurred. So let's put a time with this. Let's say 15 a.m. and let's say this one occurred at 10:23 a.m. All right, so we have 2 new strings here that we want to append. So let me uncomment these 2 sections for the time being, and let's come up here and put our method that we need to use to append. So we already have our handler and we have our new data. So now we need the fWrite function, and we are going to simply plug in our handle and our new text. All right, and let's also append our second text. So handle. All right, so now we have done that, and I want to change the name of the file to my test, or we could continue using new file. Right now it has 1 line in there, and we want to append these 2 new lines to this file. All right, so let us now run this application. So let's save it. Let's refresh. And we see here that it has appended that new text that we put in, right? So read, write, and append data in files. And as I said before, we will be looking at how to do some more complex actions using files later down in the course.